Welcome to Grow and Expand with Ace, where we break through limitations, we heal from within, and we step into our highest, most expansive, most fulfilled lives and businesses. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode as we delve into the world of burnout. Burnout is a topic that I am intimately familiar with, as 5 years ago I myself burned out, and I'll share some of my experiences during this podcast episode. But it's not just something that I went through, it is something that I call it a national crisis at the moment. So many people are burning out and they don't have the tools or the guidance or the support to know what the next best step is for themselves. And so at the heart of today's podcast episode, that is what I hope to give to you. A recent international study came out late last year, and it actually revealed that in Australia, 83% Australians currently consider themselves as experiencing burnout. That is a phenomenally high statistic. We were the country with the highest statistic. Of the 83% of Australians that are currently experiencing burnout, women are burning out at much higher rates than men. Women are burning out at about 40% and men are burning out at about 30%. And the data also shows us that when it comes to burnout, the rates for men are on the decline and for women, it's on the continuous increase. And that's why I felt called to speak on this topic today from my own personal experience, so that you can find whatever it is that you need to hear so that you can know what your next best couple of steps are. So 5 years ago, I remember burning out. I remember probably knowing a number of, years before that I was heading towards somewhere not great. But it's sort of this idea in the back of your mind, and a part of you knows that what you're doing isn't sustainable, what you're doing isn't fulfilling, what you're doing isn't joyful, and that you're getting tired and you're getting overwhelmed and you're getting exhausted. But there's this other part of you that just keeps fucking pushing forward, pushing forward, pushing forward. And anyways, 5 years ago, when I finally hit the point where my own body would not let me go any further, I remember sitting at home and trying to, on my own, because before this date, I had seen numerous counselors, numerous psychologists. I'd been on anxiety medication my entire life. I didn't find that the external system and the world that we lived in at the time could help me. That was my belief at that time, because no help that I looked for really gave me answers that I could connect into and believe in and actually move from, knowing that I'm moving towards something better and greater. So when I hit that point, I felt like yet again, it was all on me to try and figure this thing out. And as a lawyer back then, I was very much in my mind, and I started the journey by trying to figure out in my own kind of mind what it is, what's happening, and what my next step is and what I need to do. And it's funny because I say I was in my mind, but the thing that came through, sure as shit, didn't come from my mind. In fact, what I 100% knew was that nobody external to me had the answers at that stage, or nobody I knew, that if I looked around me, the very people I was turning to, trying to sort of ask for help or broach the topic with or get some support and guidance from, were probably just as burnt out as I was, but they were just still pushing through, whereas I had now decided not to. And so I remember clearly knowing that this wasn't the time for me to look outside of myself. It was a time to get real within myself and with myself, and to understand what's going on for me so that I can find my way out of what felt like death, emptiness, numbness, total disconnect. And so obviously an entire journey unfolded. For me, it was much more rooted in personal healing than it was in a corporate or in a working sense. But all the same, because what you do in one area of your life flows into the other. And the number one thing that no matter what I do now, when I look back at it, the number one cause of burnout is self-abandonment in some way, shape or form. So if you Accept that it's self-abandonment that is leading you towards exhaustion, overwhelm, soul tired, zero joy, and just pushing through. Then the answers become pretty simple and pretty easy, because self-abandonment just means you need to understand within yourself where is it that you're abandoning, and then you need to take steps towards not abandoning yourself, right? Because when we're in the journey, we don't necessarily know how to get to the end, but we have a rough idea of what it is that we want to experience and how we want to feel and what picture it is that we want it to look like. And so then in any given moment, we can actually just stop and ask ourselves, is this thing that I'm doing, is this step that I'm taking, is what I'm currently living taking me closer towards that goal or further away from that goal? And then the answer is just simple. And then you just take the next step and you kind of keep going and keep going. And so that's the methodology, I suppose, for anybody who finds themselves in a period of burnout. That's the methodology of what to do to start taking those next best steps towards. It's not even really overcoming burnout, but that's obviously a byproduct. What it really is coming home to yourself, finding your own inner alignment and living and operating from that. And so what I'll share now is everything that I've learned since then, some patterns that I've had to work through myself, patterns that I see in clients all the time. And you might find some resonance in some of this, or you might not, because everybody is so different. But if you keep in mind that in some way, shape, or form, you are abandoning yourself and trying to figure out where that is and what you can do to closely align and continuing to walk that path, that is the road to recovery, to fulfillment, to happiness, and to inner peace. Okay, which is what I suppose I describe as the antidote to burnout. So probably one of two things that I've seen a lot of women struggle with when they're burning out. And it's this fear that, if I admit it and if I speak it and if I say it, it means I'm going to lose everything. Okay, and then what the journey has taught me is you're not losing anything, you're gaining yourself. And anything that doesn't stay is just not in alignment. And the fear of losing it is so much bigger than the actual reality and the loss. And so something people have mentioned to me is, what if I'm in the wrong career? And that's why I'm burning out. So I suppose there's kind of two key ways in which one can self-abandon when it comes to work. You can either be in the total wrong career, correct? For example, I was a corporate lawyer, and now I'm a personal growth and energetics coach. So in the one, I was in litigation, so I consistently fucked people up. I fought for a living. I was incredibly good at it. But in my heart, all I've ever been is someone who likes to uplift humanity, uplift people, and connect in a positive manner, make a positive difference. And so I can't think of two things that is more on opposing sides. And it's probably, one of the most obvious self-abandonment. Once I kind of got to the answer, it was quite obvious to me. So a lot of us will be in that category where we're in a career, we're in a job, or we're in a business or in an industry that's not actually aligned with who we are within our true core values. And we're not getting the things that truly lights us up and makes us come alive on the inside. And why? Well, if you think about it, when we're kids and we graduate, the pressure that we put on children to know what it is that they want to do for the rest of their entire fucking lives is a joke, because nobody can. Okay, and then most people can't know what it is that they want to do with any sense of certainty, because you kind of have to start walking the road, experiencing it and going, yeah, actually this works, or fuck no, it doesn't, or there's some tweaks I'd like to do here. And then you need to kind of be able to move from there and continue to follow whatever it is that lights you up, right? But way back when I was in grade 12, the pressure to find a job in an industry that my parents and the, I suppose, conditioning that I was exposed to considered reputable or successful or good or meaningful. So then pick it, study it, don't fail a subject, and if you don't like it, never ever admit it and change course, because that would be admitting, that you were wrong, which is one of the hardest things to do. And so you kind of started on a self-abandonment. Like perhaps you wanted to, be an actress, or perhaps you wanted to be successful in sport and you wanted to explore that. Perhaps you wanted to be a teacher or whatever the case may be, but you chose to rather follow the external expectations and conditioning into another career. And now wherever you find yourself, in fact, you knew yourself then way more, and what you really needed was guidance and support to find what works for you in your strengths, in your passions, in your gifts, and within the shit that lights you up. And then also to be held in a safe space around, is this, try this one. And if this career isn't right, try that. And maybe play around with this, idea or thought or industry. And anyway, so a lot of us will find ourselves in a career that was never right to start with. I suppose that's the summary. And so that's abandonment at its very fucking core, because you are literally not in a space that allows you to show up within those core parts of you that makes you come alive. But in saying that, a hell of a lot of us also are in exactly the right spaces, exactly the right careers, doing exactly the right things for you in terms of what lights you up, what brings you passion, your gifts, your talents, but how you are showing up within that space is in a way that self-abandons. And that's what we're going to cover off on now for the next little part of this episode. Okay? Why I know that is because even when I left the law and I started personal growth, I still self-abandoned in how I showed up in my business. I learned the traditional mechanisms from the corporate masculine system. It didn't work for me then. It sure as shit didn't work for me in my personal growth business. And before I knew it, I could see that I was heading for the same cliff. Now, luckily, I have learned how to clock a lesson when it comes up, a trigger and a lesson. And I know you either repeat or you evolved. And I chose to evolve. And I had to release block after block after block after block that showed up for me that would have just otherwise seen me again self-abandon, no matter that I was in a career that outcome speaking and on a day-by-day basis speaking actually really lit me up. So we're just going to go through some of those ways now in which we can often self-abandon even when we're in industries and spaces and careers that actually do align with who we are at the core. So the number one thing is, if you are overwhelmed, exhausted, and let's just say that, overwhelmed and exhausted. If you look back to the last week or the last 2 weeks, you don't have to look back any further than that. What you felt these 2 weeks is a pattern that will be in your future if you don't evolve. If you look at that and you were overwhelmed and exhausted and you did not stop and take care of yourself first and foremost, give yourself the rest, give yourself the space, give yourself the joy, give yourself the not pressure, I suppose, whatever it is that was leading you towards that overwhelmed and exhaustion space. If you didn't slow down, listen to what you needed and gave it to yourself, that's the number one block. It's the block where we keep pushing forward and moving on, putting our needs, putting our nervous system, putting our emotions last for every single thing outside of us. And if you did that or didn't do that, right? If you didn't slow down, then you're unlikely to slow down or to put yourself first when it comes to a myriad of other things that often happens in business. So you're very unlikely to then put yourself first when it comes to people pleasing. That's another guaranteed way to burn out. Someone tells you what they expect, what they want, and how they want it. And if that's not naturally aligned with how you do things, how you show up, and what it is that you offer, but you are so desperate not to lose them, or on another scale, desperate to please them, you self-abandon your natural baseline and who you are to meet them. That's self-abandonment. Okay, and if you do that for one person, you're doing that for everyone. So there's another block, because when we show up as ourselves, as authentically as possible, doing the shit that we love, with the people that we love, in a way that we love, there is very little room for burnout. If you're operating your own business, the other key blocks that came up for me that I really had to work on and release is a lack of self-trust. I would spend hours and hours in my mind worrying about 7 steps ahead based on a fear of failure that I might not be able to do it. That even when I was resting, and even though I was taking time and not necessarily actively working, my mind was so busy worrying about things that was going to occur way down the line, but so caught up in a cycle of whether I will or won't be able to, that I couldn't actually switch off in the moment to rest, to trust, to relax. And so then that pattern is one that keeps you mentally exhausted and in brain fog like absolutely nobody's business. Another way in which a lot of us self-abandon in the workspace is we try to convince others of our worth, we try to convince others of our value, and we try to convince others of what it is that we have to offer. And in that convincing energy, we are trying to meet them within their narratives and what they're expecting and wanting and desiring. And that is self-abandonment at its core, because we're saying what we think you need to hear, how you need to hear it, and I'm doing whatever it is that I think you want done, how you want it done, and I'm consistently doing it from the outside in, which is just exhausting for me even in that 2 minutes saying that. Okay, whereas coming home to yourself is just recentering into doing what you love, doing it how you love it, doing it in spaces and places and with people that you love doing, and honoring that counts more than any other person's expectation over you. Yes, you can meet people, but they need to meet you as well. And so it's not to say you never show up for anyone in any way, shape, or form. It's just to say you don't do that to a level that self-abandons. And that's a really important piece, because especially for women, how we show up, if we show up at our own detriment for our children, that's how we're going to show up for partners. That's how we're going to show up for bosses. That's how we're going to show up for clients. That's how we're going to show up for people that work with us, employees. And at the end of the day, there is very little of you left, because you've disconnected from those parts that make you you in an endeavor to achieve something for someone else. So it's a coming home into yourself. And so the point when it comes to burnout is there's some core pillars or core things to think about. If we have lived for so long for other people, it's hard to know who we are. I remember when I started my journey, I didn't know what I wanted or desired, what I was good at, what lit me up. I had no idea. But a quick measuring yardstick for me at any given point in time was, is this current thing doing it? Nah, great. There's an answer. And if you keep asking that question, it'll quickly tell you what you don't like, what isn't aligned, what doesn't work for you, what doesn't spark joy, what doesn't feel energetically free. And by virtue, that doesn't, you're closer to finding what does, right? And often they're on opposite kind of spectrums. And so a way to figure out, though, what is in alignment for you, that is a massive topic, but here's some quick things to think about. Each and every one of us has values, inner values. And these values aren't something we pick from a paper today when I put the paper to you. You go back to key points in your life, you journal on them, you reflect over 2 or 3 ones, and you'll see those core values jump out at you, and they'll be consistent. Those are the things that you value. So if you work for someone or in a career, or you run your business in a space, incorporate it from that space, from the space that is your values. And that is already one of the biggest changes you'll see. Number 2, every single one of us has things that we love doing, things that excites us, things that we're passionate about. Okay? Write them down. What is it that I love? What is it that I'm passionate about? What lights me up? What sparks me? And how can I incorporate this in my current job or in a new career? How can I do more of this? What's the energy behind it? And how can I incorporate that energy in everyday kind of tasks? So that's a really kind of key other one. And then the third and last one is my strengths. every single one of us has things that we're naturally good at, things that just flows, things that we don't have to overthink, over-prepare for, things that just are. And so when we can identify that and at the same time identify the shit that we will avoid like the plague because we hate it, the minute we can kind of identify those two, we can immediately assess, how can I do more of my natural strengths, my natural gifts, my natural talents? How can I bring it in, weave it in? How can I create my business and my products and my programs and my workshops or my client deliveries? How can I incorporate it from my strengths? So if you hate writing but you love talking, do it on a Zoom or Loom video. Simple example. You can find ways, once you know what your strengths are, what comes natural, what takes very little energy and effort, and what takes a whole bunch, you can find ways to play around and obviously incorporate the talents and the gifts more. And you can be conscious of the ones that don't serve, that you don't like. Perhaps you can outsource. Perhaps you can give that to another staff member. Perhaps someone else can do that. And of course, there'll be times when you've got to do shit you don't like doing. I'm not trying to create some utopia where everything is 100% magical all the time. I'm simply saying burnout means you have moved so far the point of what is truly you, that your body is shutting down, your emotions is all over the place, your nervous system isn't coping, and your mind's continuing to try to clock out because it's too uncomfortable to be within you. And the way back is to find the way back within you. Those things that you love, you enjoy, and you're good at. So I hope everyone really enjoyed this episode, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with a very large audience because numbers don't lie. So many of us are currently facing burnout, but there is 1,000,001 little things that you can do to identify and weave in those parts of yourself that's authentic, that's easy, that you enjoy, that you're passionate about, that's feel good, into any career, any business, any job, and in your day-to-day moments. So thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have a beautiful week ahead. All of my love. S.